We're going to begin this morning with the situation in the Middle East, where the conflict with Iran is escalating with attacks on major energy facilities in the region. Now, in the past hour, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane gave a briefing to reporters at the Pentagon about the state of the conflict. Secretary Hegseth vowed to finish the war and claimed today would see the largest U.S. strike yet.
To date, we've struck over 7,000 targets across Iran and its military infrastructure. We've hit hundreds of their defense industrial bases. To manufacture new ballistic missiles has probably taken the hardest hit of all. Ballistic missile attacks against our forces down 90% since the start of the conflict.
For more on this, let's turn to CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio, who's following the developments from our London newsroom. So, Ramy, you were listening to the briefing. What stood out to you?
Hey, Kelly. Yeah, you know what we just ended there on that sound from Secretary Hegseth. He said that Iranian drones and missiles are down 90%. If we were expecting that might increase in terms of the degradation, then that is something that we did not get because he's been saying that number in past press conferences. 7,000 targets hit in Iran. But there was a question about the timeline of this war. Again, a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world wondering how long this could go. He said that the U.S. would not be drawn into answering this question, and that they were very much on plan. But then things got a little bit, I guess, maybe tense with one question from a reporter there talking about this new $200 billion Iran war supplemental. And he basically said that this could go on. They're going to try to push it through Congress. It's a question on whether Congress would actually allow for this, approve this. But we have to think of this. If they're asking for this much money, $200 billion, that at least potentially implies that this war will carry on for some time. In recent reporting, in the first week of this war, we saw that $11 billion number. So this $200 billion number massively surpassing that. This morning, we also saw Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, one of the surviving ministers so far after so many have been killed and assassinated. He tweeted out on X that the $200 billion number was just the tip of the iceberg, again here, conveying the expectation that the war, again, will go on much longer.
So in many ways, Ramy, this war continues to increase in cost, not just through dollars, but lives lost as well. The Joint Chiefs Chairman noting that 6 service members remains coming back to the country at the beginning and end of his remarks. And with watching the price of Brent crude jump, the price of oil jump, what's the latest on the fighting? It doesn't appear that there's any change.
Right. And overnight, the reason oil and gas have surged, for example, we saw Brent crude surge about 7% overnight to $119 a barrel. Here in Europe, in terms of gas futures, that jumped by about 25% overnight, and is because of this continued attacking from, for example, from Israel on Iran's gas fields, for example, the Pars gas fields. This is in the Persian Gulf, and that was in retaliation also for what was happening also with Qatar. Israel's military bombed this infrastructure at Iran's South Pars gas field. To put this in perspective, and there it is on your screen right there, the redder part is what Iran owns, and the slightly less red, that is part of Qatar. That's a North Dome gas field. It's all basically one field there. And the South Pars is what was hit. It's the largest gas field in the world, and Qatar actually controls more of that field. But in retaliation again, Iran launching those missiles at Qatar, hitting the world's biggest facility that processes liquefied natural gas, about 20% of the world's LNG there. That is Ras Laffan Industrial City. There it is overnight. You see that plume there. It was also hit in the first couple of days of this war. Extensive damage. Ras Laffan has been out of commission since the early days of this war. And again, that is why we're seeing this rise, this surge in oil and gas today.
Yeah, I'm looking at oil prices right now. Brent crude right around 113. But the good news is that U.S. crude hasn't topped $100 a barrel for a while. All right, Ramy, thank you.
Thanks, Ramy.
Yeah, you bet.
Let's jump to the nation's capital now. You're looking at CBS News White House correspondent Willie James Inman. Willie, good morning to you. Help our viewers understand, as they wake up and absorb today's information, what the president was saying overnight, because he posted to Truth Social both condemning Israeli attacks on this Iranian gas field Ramy mentioned, but also warned Iran the U.S. could choose to bomb those same oil fields. So what's the logic there?
Yeah, that's right. Errol and Kelly, good morning to you both. The president posted late last night about this Israeli attack on that gas field, that Iranian gas field. And here's what the president said on Truth Social. He said Israel did this out of anger for what's taking place in the Middle East. But he also said that the United States knew nothing about this particular attack. And of course, Iran responded to this Israeli attack by striking energy infrastructure in Qatar, to be specific. The president then went on to say in his Truth Social post that no more attacks will be made by Israel pertaining to this particular gas field unless Iran strikes Qatar again. The president then goes on to say in which instance the United States of America, with or without the help or consent of Israel, will massively blow up the entirety of the South Pars gas field. So certainly a major escalation in terms of this conflict, one that will have effects, as you were discussing just with Ramy, with energy prices throughout the world. We've seen those oil prices tick up. Liquefied natural gas is a major export from this part of the world as well. And in large part, those gas prices have ticked up because the Strait of Hormuz, traffic effectively stopped for the most part out of that important waterway, with Iran putting pressure on those vessels and other nations, including the United States and Israel. We certainly have seen the president come out and call for other nations to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, the Prime Minister of Japan will be here today, and that will likely be one of those major topics of conversation in that meeting between the president and the Prime Minister.
Well, speaking of that, Willie, James, you mentioned the Prime Minister from Japan set to meet with President Trump after he has called on several countries to help protect the Strait of Hormuz. I do think what's kind of interesting here is, for those watching, the backdrop is Japan's unique legal system in regards to what it can and can't do on international disputes. So how do you expect this meeting to go? I mean, it could be fairly tense.
Yeah, you're perfectly right to point that out, Kelly, because Japan, by law, it's written in its constitution, is effectively a pacifist nation. They can't use their military in an offensive way. There are, of course, limited exceptions, but Takaichi, the first female prime minister of Japan, will be the first G7 leader to meet with President Trump in person here at the White House since this military conflict took off, with Israel and the United States launching attacks on Iran. Of course, other nations have been compelled by the United States, by the President of the United States, in particular, European nations, for instance. The President looking to put pressure on China, which, of course, gets a lot of its energy from this part of the world. But Japan, this is top of mind, perhaps, for the president in that meeting that's supposed to happen at 11 a.m. But it's a unique situation because the Japanese military largely cannot be used in this particular way. Kelly, Errol.
All right, Willie, James, Inman, thank you.